Now, the Crescent itself had many, many different particular residents. This, of course, is... Come on, who's your neighbour there? It's Jerry McConnell's father. Peter McConnell outside his house and showing it's one of the, and very few, apart from the two of the photographs that Sheila has sent me, I was struggling a wee bit to try and get photographs of the Crescent from sort of an earlier period, and that's Peter McConnell outside his house there. There's a photograph that Sheila had. That's your mother and father standing outside. What's interesting about it is, number one, how tidy it looks, but apart from that, there were no cars in it. It was not a place...
There was one car at one stage, and there was people
They were not designed to have cars, and when you go up there today, I presume every house has at least 2 cars, if not more, and they were designed like that. It is very quiet in comparison to what you think of streets today, not to see a car at least outside one of the houses. Now those are the houses down the right hand side, of course, numbers, whatever they are, 50 on Hopkins is, yeah, down that side. It was designed, of course, next to the quarry, and this here is the quarry about 1965, and the quarry is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Now, Charlie mentioned me, this is something that I didn't know because I was never close enough up there, that the alarm would go off. I presume that's when the explosives were starting, and the alarm would go off and the houses would shake with the noise as the alarm told everybody to get inside the room. Were there ever stones went flying over the Crescent or blew up or any sort of accident like that? Never happened. Okay. You'd hear the bang. Yeah, it's at the back of these high numbered houses on this side. Yeah. And their gardens go right back. Yes, yeah. They would feel the clay going down. And of course the quarry got bigger and bigger and bigger and extends almost into the backs of the houses that were on that side of the Crescent. It's also an unusual shape. It's neither circular nor it's got a bend in it, and it goes round in a nice circuit, shall we say. Very neat, I must say, design, very neat the way in which they did it. This is slightly more modern houses. This is quite recent, taken from a drone, I think. And again, when you look at the houses, the back gardens, the ones who backed onto the quarry, which is here, had quite longer gardens in comparison with the ones who were around the middle of the Crescent. So you can see here how long people's gardens were, going right back to the quarry boundary on this side. And even over here, there's quite large gardens there, and in here, there's quite large gardens. Whereas the people who lived in the middle of the Crescent, in the circuit bit, there's a hedge or a boundary down the middle here. You can see it there? And that all the houses, their gardens back onto each other. So the size of your garden is limited by the fact you can only go halfway back, because the people on the other side, their garden is coming the opposite direction. So you are limited. And in fact, there are quite a number of fairly small gardens as you get to the corners. The gardens, or the backyards, whatever you call them, would be considered, I suppose, quite narrow as you go around that way. You do see, of course, there's far more cars here. There were 2 single houses. The one at the front here on the right-hand side, the first one, was a single standalone house, and that was Hopkins's, right? It was a single standalone house. And the one round here at the very end, which John MacDonald was the first man in, is now P.J. Ward, and P.J.'s done it up in a slightly different style to the other houses. It was a single standalone house. Mallins were in that, yeah, after that, yes. After John MacDonald's only a few years in it, yeah. Now, one of the things about the other houses, some of them are semi-detached, they're in 2s, and a number of them then there's a, let's say a terrace where you have 3 or 4, or maybe 5 in a single block. And one of the advantages, of course, of the semi-detached houses is you could get around the back of your house, whereas in some of them maybe you didn't have a direct access to a backyard. Particularly in the middle there, you couldn't get down.
Get in, there was a right of way.
There's a right of way,
Oh, yeah.
yes, which will bring you down
Round the back.
into your backyard, yes, but not directly down the side of your house. You had to go up a little bit and come round the other way, and that's one. This is a photo of a thing about Paul Ogle, and I think that's great, powerful drone photograph, because the houses are shown up really well up at this end here. You've Dickie Sullivan's at this end, you've the single house here, Lockman's, which is at this end, right on down, showing the whole move of the Crescent and the great structure that it is, and back round the other side, round here to the front. And as we number them here, number 1 is Sean Farr's. It's the first house on the right-hand side of the front row facing the Crescent stores. And then it goes 1 down to this one, and then goes down to, I think, 21 on this side. There's 2 at the end, which are 22 and 23. And then you come back up this side, up to Sullivan's, which is 42, is it?
How far along the next one?
The next, oh sorry, this one here, yeah. The one attached to Farrell's, even though Farrell's is number 1,
Yeah.
it's 42. And then across to Hopkins, which was 43. And then right on down this side to Peter Ward's, which is 71. It's the last of the 71 houses. I think that's a great picture there. And the other thing it shows is the size of the lake that's built up at the quarry, up at the top there. And no great stories of children falling into the quarries or nothing. Nothing ever like that. Sorry? Yeah, at the sides and these places. Now, today, I suppose parents will be far more concerned about their children heading out there, but children those that sort of just went out and played anyway.
I remember us out in one of the men that come up from the quarry and chase us.
Yeah.
Before the armed war, chase us.
In case there was going to be an explosion.
There was going to be an explosion.
Yeah.
Not with the us.
Right.
Chase us.
And move everyone back. Now, these are list copies taken from the rent book, the very first rent book when the Crescent was in, and I thank Charlie for giving me a copy of this. Now, in the rent book, not only were rents, of course, collected in the Crescent, they were also collected in Lakeview and in some of the other council houses that were around the town, right? And this is the Lakeview houses first, just to show you them. Now, one of the things that's interesting about this one is the price of the rents. John McNeil in number 1 Lakeview, which is the first house in Lakeview, past Fairy Grants as you're going down Lakeview, was paying 5 shillings and 11 pence. And that's a 2-storey house. Whereas people in the Crescent are paying 16 shillings and 4 pence, or 14 shillings and 6 pence, whatever their rents are in those places. Whereas the people in Lakeview are paying much less. Now, some of the people who are in this, of course, you'd recognise. Tessie Finnegan, number 4, is Manzenti's connection. You have Kathleen Walsh, of course, Herties, Tolls, Faley McCoy, right on down. And they're mostly the houses in Lakeview down the right-hand side of Lakeview as you go down that. Number 2, surprisingly, I didn't realise, Callahan's, that's Wilfred Callahan, the postman, whose brother was actually married to a grandaunt of mine. He was a postman. This is the other side of Lakeview going down, and the man at the bottom at the very end is Robert Irwin, and that's the last of the single-storey houses where Annie Irwin lived and Stuarty was their house. And again, a lot of the names people know. James Mooney is there, Ollie Mooney's father. Patrick Cole, Paddy Cole's father, is there, and Roaches and Comiskey's are still there. And you notice when you get to the single houses, the 1-storey houses, sorry, they're paying 4 shillings and 8 pence, right? Not 5 shillings and 11 pence, because they've only got a single-storey house, and they're all paying their rent. The other houses which were in the town where people were paying rent, there were 3 in York Street, and I'll have a photograph of them in a moment. Joe McKenna's, now Katrina's not there, is she? No. Joe McKenna's in one, Brady's were in the middle one, and Des Kiernan or Dick Kiernan was in the third. Those are the 3 houses beside the barracks, right? And they were council houses as well, and rent were collected in those. There were 2 over in Church Street, McKierney's and Tommy Cole's. You know, the 2 houses that are back slightly from church. I have a photograph of them, and those who don't know it. And there were 6 in Thomas Street. Connors on the corner, Connors again, Hughes's, another Connors as well, and then Liddy's beside the clinic those 6 houses had rents collected. Now, there's possibly another couple of houses which are not on that rent book. Now, maybe they're in a different book, I don't know. So we have 3 in York Street, 2 in Church Street, and 6 in Thomas Street, plus the 20 years, whatever it was, 30 in Lakeview. And then the 71, of course, which are in the Crescent. Now, I'm going round the Crescent a bit, in a few minutes slightly after this, just to show you the original documents. And there are copies, and if anyone's interested in taking these. Number 1, Sean Farr, one of the 15 families who are still there. Brendan is still there today, and Farrers are one of the continuous families. The second house in is Christy Hoff, which became, that was Seamus McShane's later on. Yeah, well, we'll have a list in a moment as to who was in them in more recent times. Hacker Flanagan, Tom was in the third one. Sadie Maloney. Anyone? Who's Sadie? No. And the fourth one are still in it today. Anna Mohan is still in the fifth one. Ned Mohan was the fifth house. Those are the 5 houses at the front, facing out onto the main road. Okay. Then when you go around the corner, you hit number 6. For some reason, James Curran isn't playing Renfrew for 7 weeks. I don't know why. Thomas McCann, and people would have Jean McCann's. Now, there are some movements in the houses where people started maybe in one house and moved to a different house, and some of them may have moved. Now, number 7 is the second house when you go around the corner on the left-hand side. People know what that is. Peter Hughes, Alice Redmond, Michael Sweeney, Joseph Comiskey, Patrick Maguire, and Teresa Fogarty. A few of the names we have trouble who they were. Now, and some of them are quite obvious who they are, because some of them are still there. But Fogarty, who's that?
There were two girls at school with us, Mary and Anne Fogarty.
All right.
And I was told recently that Mrs. Fogarty was related to lived up past Brendan Hughes is there.
In Kinnigan? All right, right. Comiskey's, no?
Yeah.
And now, obviously, some may have been only there for short periods of time. You see again, they're paying their 16 shillings and sixpence. Keep going on down that side of the street, the left-hand side. Patrick Donaghy, Margaret Connor, Henry Cole, Harry Cole. Was he Cole's at Church Street? We would have trouble finding Harry, because at one stage he's described as the late Harry Cole, and then another one he's still alive. Not quite sure about Harry, or who. Henry is his official name, but he was called Harry Cole. Sarah McKenna, Michael McCardle. That's Johnny, is it? No? Oscar and Martin McCardle and them. No? That's not them. They were further down. Patrick Dillon, and so the Dillons have been 1950. Paddy Dillon is there. Michael Ward. Oh, Jerry McConnell's, yeah. Rita Christie, John Duffy, Samuel Cross. Sam Cross was in one of the 2 houses as you go round the corner, the 2 facing the green at the bottom. He was in one of those. And then you come round the other and you have Andrew Clark, Andy Clark, and Nigel is still in that house today, so you're coming round the corner. Francis McShane, and then someone called James McMasters, and McMasters not a name that got me at all. Now, some of these people may not have been all that long in some of these houses, and displayed around. Now, one of the interesting things is, when the council was giving out the houses, did they put people together, say 2 brothers, and put them in adjoining houses, or cousins or brothers and sisters? Because what we think might be the only 2 Protestants that were in the whole Crescent, Sam Cross and Andrew Clark, end up in 2 houses next door to each other. Now, that's a deliberate religious thing to put them together or not. Now, we have another Church of Ireland man later on who doesn't appear to have been terribly long in the Crescent. I'll just point him out as we go on as well. We're now coming up the left-hand side, is that right? Back towards the Crescent stores on the left-hand side. Francis Duffy, Dinny Burton, of course, we all know. George Kinsella. Right.
There was on a short time and then it changed.
Yeah. Anthony Carthy. Was that the guard? Was he Anthony? Guard Carthy. Jack McCarthy's father. Was he Anthony? Was that his first name? I never knew. It was just Guard Carthy is all we would have called him. Patrick McEnany. And then the two McNeils were together. Paddy the printer and Jimmy the barber were together in each other. And then the two Loftuses were together. Luke Loftus and Patrick Loftus. Anybody here related to Loftus? No? I thought somebody had mentioned going back to the world. So the two Loftuses come together. Edward O'Connor, no doubt who that is, James Donaghy, Bernard Comiskey, and Ailish Duffy are all up that side. Ailish, of course, one of the Levys from Sean Levy's sister, Frances and Noel, Frances and John's mother. And they're up that side, and you keep going to the end. Des McGlynn is in the third last one on that side. James Sullivan the tailor, which is Dickie Sullivan's connection. And then the last house in that left is Joseph Murray, is Joe Murray. And he was the principal in the tech. He took all those photographs of the Corpus Christi processions that were done in the town. They were all Joe Murray's. And Joe was in what is the adjoining house to Sean Farrell's number 1. It's they're two in the same block, but they're numbers 1 and 42 together. You go across then to the right hand side. The single house then is, as you're still there, Nicholas Hopkins is in the first one, and you go down the other side. You Patrick Donaghy, Des Kiernan, Joe McElroy, Dial. Now number 48 was an interesting one. Robert J. Lockhart. And I went looking for Lockharts and to see who Robert might have been. And I'm just going by the surname, that he's more likely, I think, Church of Ireland rather than a Catholic. And Robert Lockhart, not long after this, within about 6 months, was offered a job as the superintendent in the almshouses, right? And the trust which ran the almshouses, of course, were the local religious ministers, the Catholic parish priest, the Church of Ireland rector and the Presbyterian minister, and they made all these decisions. And they appointed Robert Lockhart as the superintendent in that lovely red brick house, Dudgeon's house, as I would call it, beside the almshouses. But then a letter came down from the church authorities in Dublin, from their, I've forgotten what the name is, refusing Mr. Lockhart the job and refusing to appoint him. And he never got appointed as a superintendent to the almshouses, and somebody else got the job. Now, not Dudgeon's, this was before, whoever was there before. Jackson's, whoever it was, were given the job instead of poor Robert, and Robert Lockhart disappears completely from the town. I don't know why they objected to. I'd like to know why they didn't want Robert as the super. He didn't get it anyway. Now, he was the first man number 40 at the Crescent, but he wasn't very long in the Crescent. Going on down that side, Bernard Connor, Mick McDonald, of course, Big Mick, Bridget Murphy, Christopher Lockman. Now, this is not Charlie's, this is your connection. But he very quickly went back to Railway Terrace, did he?
No, not for about 10 years.
All right. He was there about 10 years. So that's the other Christy Lockmans. You keep going down, you have Ollie King, Bernard Murphy, who is Bernard, Brendan Clifford, Hanratty, Jamesy Farrell, Riley, James Dorsley, Ken Dorsley's father is in. We're going down that far side. Charles Murray, Frank Fleming, Francis Hughes, still a lot of the names people remember around the town. Joseph Duffy, a man here, and I was trying to figure out what that name is, and it's badly written. Charlie thinks it could be Corcoran.
That's changed now.
Oh, is it? They lived in the shop. The Corcorans ran the Crescent stores, right? No, I don't know what that is. Is it Cochran or Gagan or? I found it very hard to make out what his name is the last one. And then 65, which I think is the Brian Duffy's house, Margaret Duffy is, down that side of the street was Thomas McCardle. And then you go to the line of houses that are facing you as you go down the back, the people who lived in the lines of houses were Michael Finn, Elizabeth Mallon and Bernard Mallon in adjoining houses. Are they brother and sister, no? Related in any way?
Two sisters, isn't it?
Were they married to Mallon?
One's married to Mallon, one's... now, in some cases, when the rents were putting down, it was the wife's name was putting down in the name in the rent book. It's not always the husband's name. So Elizabeth could be the wife of somebody else, Mallon. Francis Geraghty, Michael Murphy, and then of course at the end, John MacDonald. Now John MacDonald, because he's got a single one-off house, is paying 17 shillings and sixpence more than the others are paying, because he's got more land around his house than he's got. Now those are the first 71 people to pay rent in each of the 71 houses of the Crescent. No guarantee any of them stayed longer. Poor Lockhart didn't stay longer than 2 or 3 months in it. And some of them would have moved out relatively quickly. Now, Harry McQuillan was in June of 1950. Whoever was in that house was only maybe 6 months in that house before Harry moved into it. And so it changes. A number of people as well moved from one house to another. Now, whether they were getting it was a bigger garden maybe in the other, or whatever it was, you have some movements as well. So you can't always be 100% certain that they stayed in these houses. And of course, when you look at the houses, one of the great things which the Crescent contributed in the town was in relation to the football club, because there were nobody living in Murray in 1948. But in the 1950s, the place was full of children. So all these young boys, born in the late 40s and the early 50s, were growing up. So by the end of the 1950s, a lot of them are now 16, 17, 18 years of age. And so they're playing minor football with Blayney. And they create a spirit in the club they bring with them. And they would all have come down from the Crescent together. And the numbers here you can see from the Crescent. Can you see them? This is 1. John Duffy. This is 2. Pat Flanagan, the hacker. This is another one. Frank Marin. This is another one. Dickie Sullivan. So the boys from the Crescent contributed an awful lot more as footballers. And of course, they played on the street in the Crescent, and they played at the field at the back as well. And they played there as well. And then eventually, after 1953, they would have all come down to the football field and backboned a whole generation of footballers in the town. This is the 63 senior team. And again, you look at all the Crescent boys who appear here. Here's one, right? Jack McCarthy. Paddy the Hacker is there somewhere, is he? I'm trying to look for the hacker. This is another Crescent man here. Dennis Burton. This one. That's Francis Duffy. His brother John was in the previous one. Frank Marin is there as well. So a lot of them are appearing, and it's one of the great things about the Forbes records is we have photographs of these people. Okay, they're football teams, but they give us photographs of who the boys were. And I've named you there in the space of about 3 years, 7 or 8 or 9 boys from the Crescent, all coming down to play football, and not in Tottenham Hotspur charities, thank you. One of the great things as well, this is a B team of almost the same year as the previous one, and you will see here the Crescent man. Is that one? Is that Paddy Aaron? I see Pat Hughes there. Brendan Hughes is there, Tim Hughes, there's a number of others. There's a wee face there at the background. Pat McEnany. I see Joe Hannerty there on the right as well. And Smush Connor is over here. And so again, all the boys in the Crescent. Now one of the great things about the Crescent, of course, is, and Blayney in general, with the number of nicknames. And everybody appeared to have nicknames. Now, we were talking just, I asked people who came in earlier, what is the most unusual nickname in this picture? And we went for Cagdy as a very unusual nickname. But there's also a Prandy, a banana, right? I'm not going to even mention Frank Hughes, who's in the background, as what his nickname is. I'll save that one for later on. And of course, the man with the afro hairstyle, Bubbles McNeil, James's son, and living again on one side of the Crescent. And again, the contribution of these boys from the Crescent was incredible. Now, apart from Bubbles, Cagney, of course, was York Street, and Tommy McManus was originally York Street. Tommy did live in the Crescent at a later stage, didn't he? Some of the others who were there. There's a crow in the picture. There's a crow McCardle in the picture. I see wee Tony Donnelly in the middle of it as well. But of course, apart from all of these, there was one boy had a nickname that he carried for his whole lifetime, and you would not have believed it could have happened, and he's in this picture. Now, before I pick him out, I'm going to pick out the boys from the Crescent who are here. This fella here, from the Crescent, come on, this boy here, you know who that is? Michael Finn is from the Crescent. You have here, Mr. Hopkins himself is at the back of the room, right, is a Crescent boy. We have here, come on, Brendan Mason. But there's one boy whose nickname and how he carried it for his, unfortunately he's died recently, taken from us far, far too soon, is this wee innocent boy here in the background, and that of course is Brian Murphy, who carried the nickname Hitler all his lifetime. And not that long before he died, we were in town, I think we were juniors, and I was in the same class, that's me somewhere in that. Brian was in the same class with me at school, and I always called him Brian. I never referred to him as Hitler. But when he went to work in Monaghan, and I met him many, many times because he lived in Monaghan for years, and all the people around Monaghan called him Hitler. Didn't know what his first name was. His son became known as Hitler's Gassen, right? And that was his nickname. And when you read the Argus and the Northern Standard and football reports now, Hitler played under 21 with the county, he played senior football with the county, he's a good footballer, tight footballer. In the newspaper reports, it actually gives Brian, quote, Hitler Murphy in the paper. And somebody realising, of course, did Hitler play football for the Fogs? How did that German get? Of course, there was a very famous German footballer who did play Gaelic football, as you all know. Gerd Muller, centre forward on the West German team in the 1974 World Cup final, won a Sigerson Cup medal with Thomond College. Well, that's the legend, right? that he won. That's a bit like the legend of Elvis Presley walking in the chip shop and dropping it. Right? But Hitler, I said to Hitler, how did you become Hitler? I was with you in first class in school, and you were called Hitler in first class, and people still call you Hitler. And eventually he told me the story. They were in the Crescent in the middle of the street, and they were organising a football match. And he was maybe 10 years old. He was a bit older than all the other wee boys. And he was putting them into the positions. You're the goalkeeper. You're the cornerback. He was directing everybody where they were going to go and giving them their orders. And some woman, whom he's forgotten who it was standing down at her gate in front of her house and was watching all the children and says to him, good your mouth there, you're ordering and dictating to all of these people. You're a proper little Hitler. And at that moment, he became Hitler, and he carried the name for 60 years. And so I think it's a great nickname. And of course, there are many, many others around the Crescent, and people here would have known a lot of nicknames, some repeatable and some not, obviously. So that's Hitler as a Gassen. And he was Hitler at that time. There's also in that picture, of course, Crunch, who became Crunch as well, and it was still, his son is still known as Crunch. There's a Pepper in that picture. There's a lot of other different nicknames to Gassens in that picture. And of course, Phil Murray is the teacher on the side. Now, the Crescent itself had many, many different particular residents. This, of course, is... Come on, who's your neighbour there? It's Jerry McConnell's father. Peter McConnell.